Hey, this is Branden McManus, Denver Broncos Super Bowl champion, and you listen to The Scoop on alscoop.com.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop, alscoop.com's podcast. This is Season 6, Episode 27. I am John DiCarlo, joined by Sam Cohn and Sam Newman. Kyle Gauss is off this week for what is the Mike Trout episode of The Scoop.
I believe that is correct.
Yeah.
Sam, do you have any other names?
Eddie George.
Where'd you get that from, Sam?
No, I'm a lucky guess.
Made it up.
Abington's own Eddie George. So a lot of stuff for you guys this week. We have an interview with Temple assistant basketball coach Jimmy Fenerty. He's joined us in the past on The Scoop. Always good to talk to him. I think you guys will enjoy this interview. Obviously a disappointing season for the Owls at 5-11, 4-10 in conference play. And the season obviously ended early in the American Athletic Conference tournament. You guys know by now that they had a chance to tie it or win at the end. Khalif Battle lost the ball off his foot. We'll talk about that and a lot more with Jimmy in a few minutes. Before we get to that, we've got some mailbag questions to get to as well. Temple did have a pro day this week. We couldn't attend in person, but Temple did have a pro day with several with scouts and coaches from several NFL teams in attendance. Again, we weren't allowed to go in person. Reporters were not permitted to be at the complex in person, but there were Zoom interviews. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. Pro day was yesterday. Sam, you guys were in on those interviews. The two big names, obviously, are Dan Archibong and Branden Mack. I'll ask you guys, and we'll dive into this a little bit, and then we'll get into the interview with Jimmy. Just based off of talking to those guys yesterday, Sam Newman, I'll toss this over to you. Based off their times, their measurables, what they told you guys as reporters, did Dan Archibong and Branden Mack help themselves yesterday?
I think Branden Mack definitely helped himself. He ran a 4.64 40-yard dash, which was good time for him, considering I think that a lot of scouts told him that they thought he was going to run like a 4.7, and he's not a speedster by any stretch of the imagination. He's a guy who's probably be a red zone threat, maybe be, a converted tight end at the next level because of his size. Who knows? I think Mack helped himself. He said he heard good things from scouts. I don't know if Archibong listed the teams, but Mack said that he spoke with teams like the Jaguars, Titans, Chargers, worked out with the 49ers scouts, so all over the place there. So, I mean, as we know, the Temple receivers have a pretty good reputation around the league right now. So that was Mack, and Archibong wasn't totally thrilled with his times. I think he ran like a 5.33 40-yard dash, which is nothing like great, but he was told not to really worry about that because of his size. And I think he weighed in under 300 pounds. So maybe you could see him being converted to a more like a defensive end than in nose tackle. Just like I think Michael Dogby kind of was during this process. Maybe that's the plan for him. But in addition to those guys, we got a blast from the past from some other guys heard from. Well, Kamir Brown was the other senior there. Anthony Cruz, former walk-on, Jagger Gardner, Zach Mesday, Aaron Monroe, Benny Walls. I think interesting thing that maybe Temple fans didn't know is that Aaron Monroe, who was a transfer safety from Penn State, he actually heard from the Los Angeles Rams in camp, and they told him, maybe during the season, Sam, I'm not sure if he said it, but they told him they'd be ready just in case any of their players went down with COVID. So, I mean, that's interesting. I didn't think Aaron Monroe exactly had a storied career here, but good for him. So yeah, no, and Archibong and Mack kind of gave like a good outlook at the respective position groups, and you'll hear audio from them in a second about that. It was kind of funny. They were asked about, why players transferred. They didn't really want to get into that, but to them, it didn't seem like, to be their cup of tea. Essentially, they were like, well, for whatever reason they wanted to do that, they decided to do that. And, they wish nothing but the best luck, but it doesn't seem like Archibong and Mack would be those guys that do it. They elected to go to the NFL instead. I think that the one thing that stuck out from Archibong talking with him is he said what stuck out, what he'd been able to take away from, Temple is mental toughness. So That's obviously probably a skill they're looking for. The next level is how mentally tough you are, especially with a year like this past. But I mean, going through 4 different head coaches, 3 different defensive schemes, that takes cold, and maybe that'll help him during the interview process as we lead up to the draft. So, cue up some audio here. So this is Dan. I actually asked Dan Archibong the question of future position. He was back. I think they were back on campus last week, maybe, or at, working out. And he said he saw Nick Baggs. So here's him talking about the future of the position, kind of keeping the future of the interior defensive line, keeping that Wild Boys tradition, and a little anecdote on Nick Baggs.
Yeah, man, we're all Wild Boys. So I speak highly of these guys because they've been vetted and they've been put through the ringer just like I have. So my expectation for those young guys is through the roof. You know what I mean? Nick Baggs, I saw Nick Baggs recently, actually. He's put on like 10 or 15 pounds and is ready to play for us. So that's good to see that. And I was talking to him a little bit about football and just, how the game is played, and his mental IQ has even just gone up since I left in a few months. His football IQ has went up. So it's a good feeling to come back and know that your young guys are getting right. You know what I mean? So my expectation for them is just to keep on that Wild Boys tradition, because that's one of the most important traditions at Temple other than the single digit tradition. And B, just to be themselves. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. You're still young, because we're young at D-line. I'm not gonna lie to you. We're pretty young. So, I just told Nick Baggs the other day, actually, I was like, dude, I remember when I was a freshman, I thought I had all this pressure on me, and I didn't know what pressure was until I was a senior. You know what I mean? So it's don't put too much pressure on yourself yet. Just go out there and play ball and just have fun with it, because you're a freshman. You can do that. You got time. Don't start worrying about that other stuff until you're an old guy. So no, my expectation for them is to the roof.
All right. So you heard from Dan Archibong there, and John was given a Tiger Woods fist bump for those of us who obviously there's no video here, so caught me a little off guard. But Sam did that. Sam did that earlier, so I guess it's becoming a thing now. A little Tiger Woods fist pump. Maybe we'll have to make that into a headline or something.
Wear golf shirts next week.
Video clip it. Yeah. Wear our Wednesday Reds.
That's not a bad idea at all. Sam, you're not allowed to go golfing ever again, no.
You don't know.
I know.
Sam could pull links again, and he could put us all to shame.
He could be hustling us.
Yeah, I'm not turning into Happy Gilmore any.
Just setting us up dumb like a plot.
365 days to hockey tryouts.
Yeah, how soon before we can? Not to get us too far off track here. How soon before we can do some socially distanced golf again?
Very soon. The weather is getting very well. This week it's been trash, but last week was nice.
Yeah. Sam, final golf question for you. Do you have a better effort in you than what you showed us back in October and November?
I hope so. God, that was bad. At least we had fun. That's all that matters, right?
Yes. We had fun. Anyway, getting back to Branden Mack. I'm sorry.
So Branden Mack, he talked about the receiver position. He was like, it was pretty, you'll hear the audio from here in a second. He was like, yeah, people know who Jaden Blue is, but he feels like Randall Jones is a bit disrespected. I feel like Randall Jones was Temple's best receiver last year when he was healthy. I don't think I'm going out on a limb saying that. Hopefully, he's coming back and can prove that. He talked about Jose Barbone, Jordan Smith, maybe a couple other names that I missed, but here he is talking about the future of that position and what he's hopeful for.
Oh, that receiver, just because I left, they still have lethal weapons in there. You still got Jaden Blue. Everybody knows who Jaden Blue is. Randall Jones. Randall Jones is probably going to be the shocker of everybody, because I don't know why a lot of people just sleep on him. He has speed, he has good hands and great routes. And we have a couple of young guys that's looking like they could step up and make some plays. Jose Barbone, he played a lot, so it's time for him to step up. He's going to do what he got to do. We got some big guys like Ronnie and Jordan Smith that could step up, be that big body receiver. And we also have some red shirt freshmen and sophomores that could probably pop on the scene and make a couple plays in that receiver room.
All right, so there you are hearing from Branden Mack. Temple officially conducted its pro day Tuesday in front of, I believe they announced that it was 21 NFL teams. the results are out. Sam put out video on Twitter that you can watch of Dan Archibong taking 28 bench reps. Other than that, I mean, we heard yesterday, we knew that this was Kyle Gauss actually, razz Sam a little bit for not crediting the Al Scoop group chat on this, but spring practice will begin on April 5th. Hopefully we'll be able, I don't know if we'll be able to get out there by then, or maybe be able to socially distance, but the hope is that, it's less than 3 weeks away before they get back on the field. So new faces. So I'm sure we're all ready for that to start up, because we have March Madness, but nothing more.
Yeah. And hopefully, I would imagine Zoom access, if they don't have us, down at EO. We'll see. We haven't been told officially. Be great to see a couple of practices in person, because as we've told all of you before, when you do get some access and you hear the coaches say, all right, 2s, get out there, 3s, get out there. And again, it's not that that's etched in stone heading into preseason camp, but you can see where some guys are, and you can track the progress, and you can see if like a young offensive lineman is running some time with the ones, or if somebody has kind of been demoted to second team. If we don't see stuff in person, obviously it's just asking the coaches on Zoom, like we've been doing all year, who's standing out, who's flashing, stuff like that. But either way, hopefully we'll have some spring ball to cover.
I think the greatest example of that is when Carey's first year here, when they have their spring game, but it was more like a practice. And we heard all about how impressive Jaden Blue looked, and then you were able to see that in person, and now look what he's doing. So, little stuff like that hasn't been accessible. So hopefully we'll get to do that pretty soon.
When Rod came in, the first 6 or 7 preseason camp practices were pretty much all open to the media, which was nice. We might not get that again, but yeah, we'll get have some football for you in the future, in the coming days. We'll see, with the NFL draft later next month, we'll see what happens for Branden Mack, what happens for Dan Archibong, if they're, round 4 through 7 guys, if they slip and become undrafted rookie free agents. I think it's safe to say that they'll probably be in somebody's camp. Mentioned at the beginning of the show that we have an interview here for you with Jimmy Fenerty, Temple's assistant coach. Again, frustrating year for the Owls. I think both the football and the basketball program are looking at an important third year of the Rod Carey tenure, and an important third year of the Aaron McKee tenure. And you're going to hear Jimmy talk a little bit about that, about how, essentially they know what they were up against. They had injuries. There was COVID, 8 stoppages, all that stuff, but they don't want to make excuses. And there are a couple of mailbag questions, at least one that holds Jimmy's feet to the fire and says, when are we going back to the tournament? Fans want to know when we're going back to the tournament. He answered that and a lot more. So we'll play this interview here with you with Jimmy Fenerty. Goes pretty much almost up and down the roster, talks a little about Hysier Miller and Zach Hicks, the 2 incoming recruits from Newman Goretti and Camden Catholic, respectively. Jimmy's pretty straightforward when he talks about what they need for the future when it comes time to maybe adding a piece or 2. So hope you guys enjoy this, and we'll react to it on the other side. So we are happy once again to have Temple assistant basketball coach Jimmy Fenerty with us on the Scoop. Jimmy, how you doing? Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Hey, what's going on, guys? How you doing? It's good to be back on. Good to see you guys, and looking forward to talking some Owls hoop here.
Appreciate you spending time with us. Jimmy, obviously, he's a 5-11 season, 4-10 in the conference. Obviously, the tough loss to USF in the opening round of the conference tournament down in Dallas. Now, we know what went into it: COVID, injuries, youth, mistakes, all sorts of stuff. And it's going to be a busy off season. But as we sit here now, what's your instant analysis of things since the season started back in November? I know it's been, just a matter of days, and so much goes into it. But as you sit back and think of how crazy everything was, what are some of the thoughts that pop into your head?
Excitement is probably the most thing, and I know that's a little counterintuitive considering the year we just had, but I think when you look at the future of Temple basketball and you look at our roster compared to some of the other teams in our league and compared to some of the other programs around, with what they're going through now with the transfer portal and everything, I think you're excited about the commitment of our young guys and the talent that they have. I think you're looking at Jeremiah Williams, who I think he led all freshmen in our conference in minutes and assists and steals, and he was like second or third in the league at one point there in assists. You got Dame Dunn, who we never really played with a full roster, but when he was out there, he averaged about 14, 15 a game, made the all-rookie team. And then you got KB, who's a sophomore, who he's all league as well. And I don't think there was anybody who we played when Khalif was fully healthy and back that could guard him. And he rebounded it really well, and he scored it at the level that we need him to score it at. And I think that's the exciting part. And obviously getting Sage healthy, getting Jalil healthy, getting those guys back. Now you have Nick, who's getting a little bit more confidence and more experience out there. You have Quincy kind of getting the same. I'm excited about the future of Temple. Now, obviously, we have one or two pieces that we got to add here in the offseason, and that's important for us. And I think that's why you probably hear my phone ringing right now behind me, vibrating here next to me. But that's a good thing, and that's right where we want to be. And I think the one thing that I'm excited about is you look at the programs around the country. And John, you and I talked about this. You look around and you see what they're all going. And I mean, there's teams in the portal right now that have 8, 9, 10 guys in the portal. And right now we have almost everybody coming back, and we're excited about that. And that shows you how committed these young guys are, how excited they are about Aaron McKee, how excited they are about our future and the nucleus of guys that we have to be able to go do something special here next year. And I think that's the big piece for us. We knew this was going to be a process. Building this up, but I'm excited about what we have and the guys that we have in that locker room and the coaches we have in that coaching staff.
Jimmy, you mentioned Khalif Battle. Obviously, a tough break for him in the closing seconds of the USF game. How has he responded since then? I know that the ball handling was something that you guys have wanted him to work on. It's a tough break when he just loses the ball like that. Right after that, you could see the guys going up to him and supporting him. And I know after the game, he said that Aaron talked to him, and Aaron just said, learn from this. How have you seen him kind of bounce back? Because that's just a tough break for any player, especially when it closes out the season like that.
Absolutely. And I think that these are the things that, and everybody talks about wanting to have success and being there right away. These are the things that you have to go through as a young player to make it all that more special when you're older and you're having the success that you want to have. And Khalif obviously had a great season for us. And I know he's going to want more. He's a guy who was in the gym almost every day since that season has ended. And most guys usually take a week or two to kind of get back. KB, he's right back in there. And I think that's something that is pretty special. And really the biggest moment for me, and that strikes to who we have in that locker room, is the second that happened and the second the horn went off. You have the entire team running to KB and running to grab him and pick him up and say, hey, man, you're not out here alone. And I think that has a really special moment for us, and a chance that it shows us we have the right guys and we have the guys that we're going to build with. I think there's some teams that you look around and when something like that happens, you got one guy walking right, one guy walking left, the other guy pointing the finger, and the other guy just sitting there sulking and with his hands in his head, and they're disconnected. But I think our guys, and it shows you a testament, like I said, to the guys we have in that locker room. So they jumped on him. So it was good.
Jimmy, looking at the roster now compared to the start of the season, who would you say has been the biggest surprise, or who's shown the most growth? Like if you had to give like a most improved player award, who would you say has shown the most growth this season?
Yeah, the easy answer is Jeremiah. But really from the start, he was a guy who established himself as a leader and as a competitor. And I think that showed. The guy who I think came the longest way was Nick Jourdain. Nick was a guy who came in, and I think you're looking at, in a normal year, he probably redshirts. And we kind of move forward with the guys we have in that locker room. And he's really gifted in terms of his skill wise, but he's even more gifted in terms of, you tell him something once, he's going to do it. And for him, it was getting that motor going. It was being a little bit more physical. It was having confidence out there on the perimeter. It was being able to post a little bit more inside. And he started to do those things. And I think that's why you saw him in the starting lineup. And I mean, hey, he's a guy who can make shots, but he comes in there and he bangs 5 for 7 from 3 on the year. And obviously he played more in like the last 4 games, but that's in that span. And he hit some big shots for us. It's a big reason we beat USF at the end of the year, that last win. And I think he's a guy who, if he keeps having that same sort of growth, I mean, we're going to be pretty successful here.
It might be a simple question, but what's the biggest difference between this team playing in like a COVID-ridden season versus what you guys could have been like with the normal offseason? Obviously, you don't want to harp on the what ifs and, go through that, but in that process. But in other words, like what part of the game most noticeably gets cleaned up if you guys had that practice time?
Yeah, I think for me, the cool part is you don't want to, like, we don't live in excuses. Aaron hasn't, I haven't, and I know our fan base isn't going to accept accept that. You know what I mean? Accept those excuses. But yeah, I mean, we get on campus in August, late August. We have a number, I think we had 8 shutdowns throughout the course of the year. You don't really have a non-conference season. For most of these guys, the first game they played was going at number 5 Houston. And I think that there's so much development that happens in the spring, summer, and fall that we just didn't have. And hey, that is what it is. We had to make do with what we had. And I think you have to kind of skip steps because you're just throwing everything together, trying to get enough so that you can go out there and play games. And I think what you're going to see this year, and I've always felt that the biggest development time for most guys is from freshman to sophomore year. So what you're going to see is these guys they're going to have their first real summer. Specifically from as physical as our conference is, specifically from a weight room perspective in terms of getting our guys stronger legs. I think that's one thing that you miss out. You look at Jeremiah. I mean, Jeremiah played 32 games. Like it's a lot for a freshman out of high school. Never really been in a weight program before. 32 minutes a game. So that's important for us. I think those are the things that you miss out on. But that's also what we're excited about now. If we can play the way we played towards the end of the year and keep having these guys develop, I think we're in a really good spot. So,
okay, Jimmy, how have Damian Dunn and Jeremiah Williams grown as leaders in the locker room? Are those two guys that you expect to be more vocal down the line? I know Aaron kind of talked about how he wants them to step up as leaders, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Jeremiah, he's got it so naturally. Like there were times when he's in the huddle and he's telling a senior what to do. And I thought that was fantastic. And then from there, I think Dunny, it's being more self-confident and being able to kind of step out and put himself out there. I thought if you look back to our Wichita game, Dame Dunn was the best player on the floor right behind Tyson Etienne. And I think being that guy every day, and he didn't do it by just going out there and scoring a ton of points. He was killing it on the offensive glass, was fantastic. There were times where all of a sudden you just see him shoot out of nowhere like he was shot out of a cannon. It was fantastic. And then doing it on the defensive end as well. And I think that if he keeps doing that, and he's a guy that everybody in our locker room really respects. And I think he's a guy that I think can really take on that role. And I think you'll need some leadership from Sage Tolbert as well. And obviously if we can keep moving forward, a lot of these young guys will keep developing into that too. But I thought those two guys are really guys that are going to step forward. And obviously KB's got a lead for us too. So I think that's important.
Jimmy, how would you compare Jake Forrester and Nick Jourdain's style of play and what those two bring to the table?
Yeah, so I think they're different. I think Jake is more 5. I think Nick is more 4. And I think Nick can play the 5. But I think he's more 4. Nick is better on the perimeter. Jake is better with his back to the basket. I think that's probably the most broad way I could say it. I think they both have a chance to be good for us here. And I thought Jake actually, I probably should have said Jake in some capacity here. And when you asked me that development question, because I do think that he matured and had a big growth. It didn't always show in numbers, but from a practice standpoint, from a mentality standpoint, I thought he was better this year and took a step. And we need him to make that same step next year. So
with Jake, I know you said didn't look that way numbers. Sometimes someone will look at his assist total and say he had 2 assists all season. What goes into that? Does he just flat out need to be better passing out of the post? Was some of that just, him kicking it out and guys just not knocking down shots? And what goes into that? Because that people are going to look at that assist total. They're not expecting him to be, in the 50s or 60s or anything like that. But if you look at that, what went into that this year with that number?
Some of it I'm sure is letting the game come to him. And when you looked at his assist to turnover ratio, a lot of his turnovers are just undisciplined things in terms of setting illegal screens or traveling with the ball just because he's not as poised in the post as he needs to be sometimes. And I thought there were segments where when Jake focuses on defending and rebounding, his offensive game is infinitely better. But when he goes in there and he's thinking score, that's when you get 2 assists in however many turns and not as productive in terms of scoring. He's a guy that's got to get more offensive rebounds for us. And I think he will. I thought there were games, you look at our first UCF game, you look at our Tulane win. I think those are games that he played well. And I actually thought he played decently well offensively and rebounding wise against USF. He's got to get better on the defensive end, and he knows that. And we're working on that with him. But that's why I thought Jake took some strides and made some strides this year. And if he can make that same stride next year, I think we got a chance to be pretty good.
Now, Jimmy, you just mentioned working with Jake on the defensive end, and the main reason that he got into foul trouble this past season is when he defends the interior, he may use his hands and upper body too much. How do you go about working on making him more disciplined defending with his lower half?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of film. It's a lot of walkthrough kind of stuff. I think it's playing more one-on-one in the post and really embracing the defensive side. And I think that's something that you got to be comfortable with the physicality of that down there too. And I think that's what Jake's been working on, and he's going to keep working on all summer. I think he's got to play a lot of one-on-one this summer. He does, and I think he's got to get in there with Sage, who's a physical guy, and he can get in there a little bit more and kind of bang a little bit down there.
When I talked to Damian Dunn about a month ago, he mentioned how helpful a guy like Mark Macon has been in slowing the game down for him just by breaking down film and helping Dame understand when to attack, when to pull the ball out.
Sure.
Did you see that kind of progress there with his game, despite the fact that he missed some time before the end of the season?
Yeah, you know what? I do. I think Dame is a guy who is slowly developing into what he wants to be, but I think it's coming. It's coming. You know what I mean? I think that's part of it, and I think it's a lot for you when you become the number one guy on the scouting report. And I think that changes a little bit of your perspective as well. Did that answer your question? I apologize.
Yeah, it did. I just the biggest thing that he had talked about was like remembering that Houston game, that second game of the year when defenses really keyed in on him and he had to deal with having to be that number one option, and kind of his growth throughout the season is feeling like he can be confident with the ball. And I was curious to get your thoughts on how Mark Macon kind of helped him in that area. Yeah,
Coach Macon, he does a tremendous job with our guys of just providing some mentorship. I think that's really important because he's a guy who's been through it. Like, he's been in Dame Dunn's shoes more times than not in his life. So he can kind of help and can kind of empathize with what he's going through. And it's another guy for those guys to talk to. And Coach Macon does a great job with that.
Jimmy, going back and talking about Sage Tolbert, I know you just mentioned him, but he didn't see the floor at all during the regular season. But then I guess kind of to a lot of fans' surprise, he played 8 minutes during the your guys' opening round loss to South Florida in the conference tournament. What are your expectations for him based on what you've seen in practice?
Yeah, so Sage, it's funny because Sage wasn't supposed to play. It kind of came to us at the end and said, "Hey, I'm ready. Like, I can do this. I can help you. We're about to play 4 games in 4 days. Let me get out there." And we used him. And I think he kind of played a little bit, a little rusty, but I thought he gave us good energy, good effort. He's a live body. What I see him is I see him being Justin Gorham. Just a guy who's physical, who's going to attack the offensive glass, who can make a shot from 3. And he's working on his decision-making on the perimeter, working on his ball handling as well. But if you look at our league is physical. Our league is strong. Our league is aggressive. And Sage, I think, is a perfect fit for our league. I think every team in the league that has won recently has had a guy like Sage on their roster. And go in there and make a lot of big plays for him in terms of just getting on the offensive glass. I remember I said this to you before. I mean, he's a lot like Gorham, a lot like Trey Scott from Cincinnati from a year ago. And I think if you can be those 2 guys, I think you need a guy like that in order to win this league, and that's why we got him. So I know he played a little differently than that in our last game, and that a lot of that was circumstance and the situation with the rosters and everything. But yeah.
JP Mormon obviously has announced that he's hitting the transfer portal. Do you guys know what's next for Dre Perry and Branden Barry? Have those guys talked to you about their decisions yet? You know what to expect from them?
Yeah, I haven't had a ton of discussions with them about it. That's coming up here soon. But yeah, I mean, I think for those guys, I mean, I think we wish them well, and if they want to leave and if they want to stay, we're happy to have them back. And I think that's sort of our take on it, and just letting them decide what's best for them and their family. And I think that's kind of what you have to do at this point. Sometimes it's a lot for a guy being somewhere for 4 years, and sometimes, hey, all right, now I can go see something else, and maybe I love it here, but I just want to see something else. I can get how that could wear on you as well. So it's just for them, it's just a matter of time here before we kind of sit down and talk to them more a little bit about their decision. JP was a guy who's a little bit more proactive about it. He kind of had his mind made up a little earlier. And we obviously wish him the best of luck and thank him for what he was able to do for our program and for the university. And we're definitely appreciative of all he gave us.
We just want to ask a follow-up about JP. Sorry, John, for cutting you off. I mean, can you take fans just in over? I know you have over the past 4 years, he's been, a leader on and off the court for this team. But can you just take fans into looking at kind of what he meant to you guys on and off the court in a season, especially like this, where just how unnormal it was for everything basketball-wise?
Yeah, it's tough. It's your senior year. You're in the middle of a global pandemic. There's social things that I thought JP represented us tremendously well in, and provided a great light to all of us, and sort of challenged us to see things in a different light and to take more of a stand if we were a little bit more passive in that. And JP brought an incredible amount of passion, and we're really proud of what he's been able to do. And obviously the conference rewarded him for it. And I think he's somebody. I keep telling him he's going to be the governor of North Carolina one day, and he's going to make great change and really impact his community if that's what he chooses to do. And I think that's something that he really brought for us. But yeah, I mean, JP, he's a guy. He's been through it, and he's been through it in a lot of different ways on the basketball floor. And he's sort of a calming influence for some of those guys. I remember the first time we played Houston. I mean, he was the only guy who scored for us in those first 5 minutes because he just said, "Hey, you know what? I got it. Let's go. Come on." Now, obviously, we didn't win the game, but those moments are big, especially when you have a team full of freshmen and sophomores that are kind of pieced together, and we maybe had 15 practices before our first game. So that's where him and Dre and even Brendan Barry, even though he had about 2 practices before our first game, they kind of helped calm me a little bit more because they've been through it.
Jimmy, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Branden because I think, reporters, fans kind of debate this, toward the end of the game, obviously against USF, he shakes loose, gets a couple looks, and we know that he can shoot the hell out of the ball. And then sometimes people will say, well, imagine if they could get him free for more open looks. But on the flip side of it, it's just not always that simple to just, you just magically draw up a play. A guy comes off the screen. If it was that simple, he'd be scoring 25 a game for you. I wanted to see if you could take listeners into what goes into that process when you're trying to get him loose for a shot. I know he's not the type of guy that can just readily create his own shot. What would you say to a fan who or anybody, any observer says, I wish they'd gotten him more open looks? What goes into that when you're trying to get him shots? Is it just as easy as that? I would imagine it's not.
Yeah. So when we play a shooter, right, what we normally do is we put somebody with length and size on them, and we're going to be physical with them and do some things like that. So after B scores 17, 2 games in a row against SMU, he's now seeing a big, longer defender. And I think if you think about it, the games where he went off, South Florida at the end of South Florida, Cincinnati at Cincinnati, the 2 SMU games, he had a smaller defender on him. And he was able to get that shot off, and we were able to find him a little bit more when we needed to. So for him, it was a matter of trying to run him off some screens, trying to have him set some screens. And sometimes he provided a lot of help for us just as by being a decoy. I think out of timeouts you saw, especially early, Aaron was running a lot for him to try to get a look. And it's a little harder to get that off with a big 6'6" dude on you with long arms, and he's right there on every catch. But I thought the one thing B did a good job of in using that is as guys started running him off the line, he got in the paint and he made other guys easy shot opportunities. He got in there and he found them for shots. But I think that's something B's going to continue to work on. And sometimes it's taking a couple shots that are that you may think are a little questionable, and realizing that, hey, B, a bad shot for you is probably a good shot for somebody else from a percentage wise. And him realizing that. And I think he started to realize it more as the season went on. But obviously I think the hard part for him is he gets here and he's 2 days into his Temple practice career, and now we're playing, and there was never really a chance to fully get his momentum going and comfortability with the team. I think that happens over time too. So that's something that he's going to work on here in the next couple of weeks as well.
Jimmy, just one more question about the team this past season. Something you guys struggled with kind of in spurts was maintaining a rhythm offensively, whether that be the offense gets a little bit stagnant or the ball's just not falling to the hoop. Do you think scoring droughts this season could more so be attributed to shot selection? Is it hero ball, or is it simply whatever the defense is doing is working at that specific time?
Yeah, I thought our offense was better this year than it was last year. And some of that is personnel, some of that's some of the great stuff Chris and Coach McKee were doing. But I think that for us, I think sometimes it's youth. I think it's sometimes for us, like if we miss a shot, we got to go up there and step up there and knock down the second one, and not kind of hang our hats on offense. I thought with the games where we hung our hat on defense, the offense kind of takes care of itself. And for us, I think sometimes if we weren't scoring, we kind of got in our own way and got a little bit of a rut mentally. And that's where you need like an older guy. And I thought KB gave us that late, where like you had an older guy who like, hey, you just put you on your back and I'm going to go in there. I'm going to make a big shot for it. I think the games we won, we hit those shots. The games we didn't, we missed. But I think that's something that for us as we get older and those guys get more used to being in those situations, it's, if you get in a rut where you haven't scored in a little bit, all right, as long as the other team's not scoring, you're still right in the game. So you still got to have the confidence to take that next shot and step up there and make it. And that's something that I think we built over the year, and we got to keep building here. Does that answer your question?
On that, yeah, absolutely. So on that note, what does it tell you as a coach when, I mean, this may be an obvious answer, but when you guys are playing Tulane and he steps up and he bricks a three, and on the same possession, you guys get the offensive rebound and he hits the next one. As a freshman, as a guy that has that shooter's confidence, what does that then tell you as someone who can forget that play and quickly turn things around? What does that tell you about him?
Yeah, and that's the way you have to be. And that's impressive to be able to do that. I think that's important. And to be honest with you, I'm pumped up that we got the offensive rebound, because I think that's something when your team is not making shots, like Houston, right? Like their percentages aren't great, but you know what? They rebound 40% of their misses. Like, so like that's you there's a little bit more confidence in there when they are, if I miss this, hey, you know what? I'm probably going to get another shot here in about 10 seconds when they go get it off the glass. And I think that's something that gives you a little bit more confidence as well. But yeah, I mean, I think you got to have a short memory, especially if you're a guy who's put in the time and you're really working on it, and be confident in what you do.
So we have a few mailbag questions here for you. These are you've heard some of these screen names before. These are from our message board, one from Twitter. The first one is TU Owls 37 coming in hot here. The question is, when are we going to make the tournament again?
Great question. Our goal is next year. That's something that we're working towards. That's something I think we're almost there. I think as you look at kind of our guys, and I said this, I always said that the biggest year I've seen in my short time here as an assistant is that freshman and sophomore year jump is always a big one. And that's going to be important for us to have a big spring and summer with these young guys. And then also to maybe add a piece or two. I think obviously Hasir coming in and Zach coming in give us an added burst there. In terms of toughness and scoring and just overall talent. And then obviously we have one scholarship left. So going out and finding a big guy who can help us down low as well, and can kind of push us as well. I think that's going to be important for us. And hopefully I think that should get us over the hump. I really do. And I know that some people are going to be skeptical about that, but I'm excited about the future of this program. I'm excited about the guys we have in there. And I'm excited about the all of the things. Like if you look at our roster, last year, we had holes. Shooting was a hole. Just overall offense was a hole. Toughness was a hole. I think if you look at what we've done, all right, we've filled the toughness role with guys like Hasir, with Jalil, with Sage, with Jeremiah, with Damian Dunn. We filled that. All right, we filled the scoring role when you add in a guy like Zach and Hasir and you add in KB. And now we got to go find a big, and that's something that we're going to go do with that last scholarship. So I think that's important for us. We got to sure up inside and be able to be a physical team, be able to score. But for us, our identity has always got to be defensive and rebounding. And that's something that we got to take to. And I think we're getting there. And I think as you get older and you keep building that mentality and saying, this goes back to your original question, is like, what does an offseason do for you? That's where you build that. And that's where you harp on that every single day. And that's important to us.
Follow-up question for you. This isn't a mailbag question, but when you look ahead to next year defensively, and if you get a full year with Sage, you get a full year with someone like Jalil, you get a full year with whatever big you bring in, and you add that type of length, what does that allow you to do defensively and explore defensively?
Yeah, I think you can do some different things. I think you can switch. I think you can do some different things. Just adding those guys in there that can be, you can be a little bit more aggressive too. I think that's something that we could really do with those guys.
Next question, another mailbag question from Berkshire. Al is the screen name. Has Jaleel White been able to practice at all this year?
He is not. He's been just recovering, and our strength and conditioning team has done a great job, as well as the rehab crew has done a great job of helping him get to where, like he said to me, Coach, like I didn't even feel this good the last time I got my meniscus and I was playing right about now. So it's been a slower process because obviously when you do it 2 times in a row, you got to kind of take care of it a little differently. But he has not practiced yet, but he will, I imagine, in the next month or 2. We'll be able to do a little bit more. Like he's shooting and doing some things that way now.
You talked about this before, just as a follow-up, when we've had you on before, had Chris on before. Tell listeners, if they missed it the first time around, what you were seeing from him in practice before he got hurt.
Oh, absolutely. Competitor, toughness, really, really good downhill, and getting downhill and being able to score. Fantastic on the offensive glass. I think he's going to spin the post. He's a mismatch nightmare because I think you could really play him 1 through 4. And if you really wanted to, small ball 5 against a team that's a little not as physical inside. He gives you like so David Collins, we couldn't stop him in the tournament. Jalil, you throw a guy like Ja on him, David Collins, you no longer have to worry about him. He's the only guy that I've been able to see all year that can give Khalif Battle some fits. And KB is going to kill me for saying that. He's going to be a little mad at me, but I thought Ja does a really good job of being able to guard him and making things a little difficult for him. And I think that's one of the things that he's going to be able to bring too. He's when you think Temple in your mind, whatever you think you're going to wind up, when you watch Jaleel White, you're going to wind up thinking he is a Temple guy and he is who we want to be.
Next question comes from SAH0770 is the screen name. Bunch of questions here about the transfer portal. How is the transfer portal changing the way you're recruiting? So far, I believe there are over 500 players in the portal already. Does that impact how you guys look at high school prospects for future roster spots? Do you basically feel like you have to re-recruit your entire roster again every year since the ease of transferring to other programs and inquiring about Temple players has changed?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So that there's right now, and I have it up, there's about 612 guys in the portal right now. Some of them we can get, some of them we maybe aren't as good as we'd like. And I think for us, it's interesting because I think it's a quick way to upgrade, and it's a quick way to get some needed depth if you need that as well. And obviously we've had some success with Jake and KB and Sage and B and Ty in the transfer portal there with us. Does it change the way? Me personally, no, because I was recruiting. I'm going to recruit all those guys anyway. Just high school transfers, everything. You got to kind of have your feel on all of it if you're going to be really good as a staff. And I know Chris and Monte have done the same. This year, like with the way our roster is set up, because we have so many young guys, you probably aren't looking at a ton of high school guys anyway. Just because we have so much youth already, especially with everybody getting this added year. If you do, you're going to want to take an older guy, somebody that's kind of been through it a little bit, can provide some leadership. And that's kind of what we're looking for right now. Now, most colleges really aren't recruiting a lot of high school guys. So I think in 2022, you'll be able to get involved with a high school guy who maybe you weren't necessarily as likely to get if you choose to go that route. Because not a lot of schools are recruiting high school guys, to be honest with you. So like a lot of the 2021s who have scholarships now, they better take them because it's going to go away pretty quickly, I would think. Now, I do think that in 4 years, it sort of goes back where, yes, you're still looking through the transfer portal, but high school guys become a little bit more because the transfer portal is going to go down because all these guys that had an extra year, that ends. So there's a lot of schools, like especially low major guys, who they can't go back to their original school because of just lack of funding at some of these lower levels and sort of things like that. And there may be a guy at a high major level who they don't want back. You know what I mean? He's got another year to use. So I think that's going to open up. But in 4 years, I think that'll go away. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up with you. You kind of answered it. I was going to say this is really kind of going to be the first time around where we see the craziness of it. We've seen it in football. You mentioned it at the outset of that question, more than 600 guys in the portal. And I think you and we all know that there are people have kind of used that musical chairs analogy where like the song's going to be over and some guys are going to be like, I overplayed my hand. And you kind of already answered this, but so you do think that this at some point might correct itself where this kind of settles down, where people get a handle on this, and you think it might kind of go back to whatever normal was, and that we're in maybe the peak of it right now?
Yeah, I think the next 2 years are probably the peak of it. I think guys are always going to recruit the transfer portal as they already did. But I think because you have that influx of more guys than you normally would, I think that makes it interesting. But I think it's the 1 year guys, the guys that are freshmen and they maybe go too high and they want to come back down a little bit lower. I think those guys they're always going to be prevalent. But these older guys, the 4 year guys that have 1 year left that they didn't think they were going to have, I think that makes it even more than it normally would. Mm. Like a guy like JP, you know what I mean? Like JP technically would be done now, but now he has another year so he can use that portal, but that's going to go away here soon.
Yeah. Next question from Twitter, and you kind of touched on this one already. The Twitter handle is Detroit Owl. What are our position priorities from the transfer portal and why?
Yeah, we need a big guy, just to be as blunt as possible. And I know there's hopefully someone is listening and they're probably jumping up and down and excited to hear that. We need some depth inside at that 5 position. And we've talked to our guys about that, and that's what we're looking for. That's something we're really looking for. If we can get a guy who could come in and really help us inside there, that's important for us.
Next and final mailbag question here. The screen name is TU1834. What is an area of development within the team that the coaching staff is pleased with that fans may not realize or be talking about yet?
One, I think the fact that we have a core group of guys that have stuck together and fought through a lot of this adversity, and that we don't have 12 guys in the transfer portal. I think it's a testament to Aaron. I think that's a testament to the beauty and the just overall package that Temple University is and has. And I think that's a testament to the guys that we have in that locker room. They're committed to what we have and what we're building. And they can say that on paper, but they've shown it with their actions and what they've been able to do, and the fact that they're all bought in and trying to help us and trying to recruit for us right now. And I think that's a big piece. If we were one of those programs that had 12 guys in the transfer portal right now, I'd be like, oh man, I don't know. But we have a committed group, and they're all here, and they all want to get better, and they're all bought into what Temple University has to offer, and what Aaron McKee can do for them, and what they can do for him.
Jimmy, 2 more quick questions for you if you have time for them. You mentioned Hester Miller and Zach Hicks. Obviously, during the course of a season, you guys are focused in a lot on what you're doing day in and day out, but you do get the chance to check in on them, albeit virtually. What did you see from those guys? Both of them had, pretty good senior seasons. What did you see from those guys in the time that you could observe them? And what do you think? You kind of talked about this a little earlier. What do you think is possible for them coming into the fall based off of what you saw from them in their senior seasons?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Hester Miller is the best player in Philadelphia right now. And I think Zach is the best player in South Jersey right now. And I'm not just saying that because they're our guys, but I think they both have played really well and for their class. And I think they've both done a tremendous job in representing their high school and representing Temple University in their senior year. And I think they're both guys who are going to help shape. I said this to you, I think, when I was talking to you this time last year, the 2020 class of guys that were freshmen for us this year and the transfers that we brought in, they're going to determine how successful we are as a program or whether we have success as a program. And I think this 21 class and the 2 guys that we have and the one more guy that we're going to bring in, they determine how high we can go. And I think those guys are 2 excellent pieces for that, and I'm excited for them, and I know the city's excited for them, and I think they sort of change the landscape of and the view of Temple University when they come here and they have success, especially locally. I think people are going to realize like how successful that we can be here at Temple University, and I think that's where we're headed. I'm excited, and I know I sound like a broken record in what I'm saying and how I'm going about this, but I'm excited about our future because of the young guys that we have in this program. Now, do we need an extra piece or 2 here? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You can always get better. That's something we want to do. We didn't have the year last year that we wanted to have, but we were young. And now that big jump for us, this is a massive summer for us. And all the expectations that you guys and fans are putting on us, you're absolutely right. We should have those expectations. And that's what we're going to do. And I think next year is going to be a huge year for us. And it starts with right now with this last scholarship. It starts with the development that we have this summer as players, as coaches, as administrators, everything. I think we're moving in the right direction, and we have everything we need here to be tremendously successful. And I think adding Zach and Hasir into that mix make us even better.
At one point, I think there was a conversation about Zach maybe wanting to redshirt when he gets to college. Is that, I know there's obviously a lot of time to decide this. Is he kind of still on that track, or does he come in and play right away?
I think that's to be determined right now. And I think like the crazy part is I know we had a lot of freshmen play here, but it is a massive jump from a physicality standpoint from high school to college. I know Zach is capable of doing it, but most times in most programs, like the good programs, you're not playing all freshmen like we did. But we have talented young freshmen who are going to turn this place into a great program. And I think that's why they did. And that's what I'm excited about. But yeah, I think you consider what Zach needs and how he's going to develop and what he thinks is best for him. So.
Jimmy, last question for you, just from a scheduling standpoint. Like, if you had to take fans through what's next for you guys, I think you still have the end of season meetings for them, and then when can you start working out again? What are the next few weeks, the next couple months look like for you guys?
Yeah, so we're not allowed to do anything with these guys for 7 days. And then you go through the next part where you can do a little bit like group workouts, that kind of stuff. And then in the summer, you'll be able to have some more time with them. And then, but the whole time that they'll be able to lift and do all that kind of stuff. Sorry, I forget the whole, like how many hours each guy has and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's, for us, it's going to be a lot of working out. It's going to be a lot of, hey, these guys are here on campus. They're going to get in the gym and play pickup. I think that's one of the best things that we have here in Temple is all the pros and all the people that come in. It's a little different, obviously, with COVID, but just to be able to get in there and play. Like, I mean, you guys remember all the times we had Lou Williams and all those guys in the gym. Like, that's what our guys need. They need to play against guys like that. They need to challenge themselves, because all the stuff that we're doing from a skill perspective and just a weightlifting perspective are great. That's awesome. But they got to go out there and play against somebody else in the summer. I think that's important as well.
Jimmy Fenerty joining us again on The Scoop. Thanks so much for doing this. Great insight as always. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, fellas, I really appreciate it. And I know I appreciate you guys hanging with us. And I know we're gonna make it worth your while. I promise you that. So we're excited and wish you guys all the best of luck, and go Owls.
All right, so big thanks to Jimmy for joining us again. It's always fun talking to him. A lot to react to there. Sam, what stood out to you?
For me, like the biggest thing I'd say is Jimmy's perspective on how much of a process it is for Aaron McKee to come in, take over as head coach, and then get them back to winning ways, kind of figure out how to make this program work under Aaron McKee. And Jimmy had talked a little bit about like filling the holes and having gaps of places they needed to fit guys in, to fill holes of places where their team was a bit depleted. So he said, for example, last year's season, they had holes in terms of shooting the ball and scoring the ball and in terms of toughness. And he felt like bringing in guys like Jeremiah Williams and bringing in Hasir Miller and bringing in, was it Damian Dunn? Those kind of guys fill in that toughness role, and bring in Khalif Battle for scoring, and Brendan Berry kind of fill in their scoring role. Bring in Zach Hicks next year as our scoring piece. And he said, like, from what they were last year to what they are, to what they have been this past year to what they are next year, the outlook is, from a general perspective, is that they've filled holes and they've filled in spots where they needed pieces, and they've done that pretty successfully, I think. And although the record doesn't show it, Jimmy has said a handful of times, and he even said he doesn't want to sound like a broken record, but he's excited about the piece they have and what their future can look like next year.
Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I think what stood out is Sage Tolbert. The fact that he compared him to Justin Gorham or gave that comparison really stood out. I mean, in the two games that Temple played against Houston, Justin Gorham was dominant. I believe he was named to first team All AAC, but I could be wrong. I think he was the most improved player, or he was the defensive player of the year. He could probably have won most improved player too. He was fantastic on the boards, and just defensive wise. If Sage can be anywhere as good as Justin Gorham, they have themselves a steal. He also compared him to Trey Scott. I think we've heard that comparison, the little junkyard dog. To hear that, and then and him talking about, Nick Jourdain coming along as far as he has. We mentioned this so many times on this podcast, but he literally described to Sam, I'm a self-described project. Probably any other year he would have redshirted, but the progress that he was able to come along and really, be in the starting lineup towards the end of the season was very impressive. So, Jimmy giving him high marks is not surprising.
Yeah, just to that question, I'd asked him, like, who's been the biggest surprise or who's come the longest way? If he had to give a most improved player award, him saying the obvious answer is Jeremiah Williams for the biggest surprise. But I was expecting him to say Nick Jourdain as someone who's improved the most, just because he was the guy that was playing scattered minutes to DNPs throughout a majority of the season, and he finds himself starting at the end of the year. So I thought hearing from him talk about what Nick Jourdain's been able to do, rather than just listening to the three of us talk about what Nick Jourdain's growth has been like, was a great answer.
And obviously he talked a lot about Jaleel White and said that he could be, again, fans might hear this stuff and say, well, and Jimmy kind of, caught himself a couple of times, said, I'm sure people think I'm being overly optimistic here. I might sound like a broken record, but I am excited about the future. Talked a lot about Jaleel White and how he can be a matchup nightmare. And he said defensively, I think might've been in the answer where I asked him, when you think about Jaleel being healthy next year and you think about Sage Tolbert being healthy for the whole year and you bringing Jake back, and maybe if you do add, obviously another thing that stood out is he directly said, yeah, we need another big. And it said that, we've got that extra scholarship left. We want to go out and get another big. If you have a lot of length, what can that do for you defensively? It can give you some flexibility. And I think that's where he talked about Jaleel, and he could be in a matchup nightmare. And he said, Jaleel White was one of the guys early on before he got hurt, was a guy that could give Khalif Battle some fits defensively. And so he seems very high on what he can do. So I think, again, as Jimmy has said, the biggest piece will be, that growth for a lot of these guys that takes place between their freshman and sophomore year. As Jimmy said, being able to play some pickup ball. If things do continue to get better and more people get vaccinated and they get more time in the facility, as Jimmy mentioned, some future pros or current pros and veterans of the game will stop by that complex and play. And as Jimmy said, a guy like Lou Williams might stop by. It's not uncommon for these guys to stop by, and then a Temple guy gets a shot at them and playing against them. So that's a lot of the stuff that they didn't get last year. So we'll have to see how much of that makes a difference, because again, it's a big third season for football and for basketball. And I think Rod Carey and on his end and Aaron McKee on his end are going to have to find that right mix of saying to their teams, essentially, look, we know what we were up against. There were injuries, there was COVID, but no more excuses. For Temple football, they got to get back to a bowl game, be bowl eligible. For Temple basketball, they should hope that they're playing in some postseason next year, hopefully in their case, the NCAA tournament. So again, I hope we enjoyed that interview there. One more mailbag question to get to that was not directed to Jimmy Fenerty, and that comes from the message board from the screen name Acton4. Question for the Owl Scoop team: how many players in this year's basketball roster who saw playing time will not be on next year's team? Here's the curveball. You must answer plus or minus 3.
I wonder if Acton 4 is from Acton, Massachusetts. Probably not. Okay, how many players will be on next year's team? Here's the curveball, plus or minus. So plus or minus 3 guys leaving?
Yeah, I think this is an easy answer.
I would say more than 3 leave from this roster. From this past year's current roster, I would say more than 3 are gone. Mm-hmm. But yeah. More than 3.
Well, I guess the criteria is okay, so we know that JP is gone. We're going to take an educated guess. Again, he hasn't announced anything that Trey Perry might be gone. And again, I would want to know what the criteria here are. Yes, could JP have come back on his extra year? Yes. Could Dre come back on his extra year? Yes. Could Brendan Barry come back on his extra year? Yes.
But also, when whoever asks this question says leave the team or not be on the roster, that can include graduation, that can include transfer, that can include a lot of things. I think if you're realistic, I think it's going to be around 3. Yeah. I think if you set it at 2.5, I might hedge and barely take the over. It's probably either 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's probably 3 at this point, but I think 2.5. Yeah, I think Sam makes a good point. it just depends on really what Dre Perry and Brendan Barry do. I mean, obviously, you have to watch out to see what Arashma Parks and Ty Strickland do, but that there's always a good chance that those two come back as well. So you can't discount them.
Yeah, I also want to qualify my answer by saying, I'm not expecting a mass exodus like there was last year. And as a lot of fans have brought up, I'm not expecting guys like Damian Dunn or Jeremiah Williams or Khalif Battle or any of those guys to look for greener pastures. I'm not expecting any of them to say they are not happy in the position they're in. They think they can do better. I think that all of them have shown in some capacity or another that they're happy in the situation they're in, and they believe in the situation they're in. They believe in Temple and the vision that they're building. When you say 2, maybe 3 guys, I think you're looking at it's at least one in JP Mormon now. It's a potential second in Dre Perry, and it's a potential third in Brendan Barry. Those are 2 guys that have not made the decisions, but could either graduate or grad transfer or wherever, find another place to go play basketball. So I think if you're looking at 2, maybe 3, it's probably of those 3 guys. I'm not expecting any other guy that played significant minutes and played a significant role and is a part of what seemed like the future. I'm not expecting any of those guys to take the door and to leave.
I know I'm not going out on a limb saying this, but I think the basketball team is a very similar position as the football team. I mean, obviously there's more players in the football team, so there's going to be more like graduating and leaving. And you saw players who only got the added year of eligibility because of COVID transfer out and look for greener pastures, or maybe, explore beyond their horizons with an extra year. But who you did see say is the younger players who have bought in and are all in with the football team. And that's, I feel like, what you're seeing with the basketball team. I don't think any of the players are going anywhere. I mean, that's obviously like coupled with the fact, looking at what happened with Cincinnati. They have somebody who was an all AAC freshman who's transferring or entered his name in the transfer portal. So I think at this point, I mean, you're like the departures that I mentioned, those are probably the most likely, but I think we would all be blown away if any of the younger players decided to put their name into the portal.
Yeah, and when it comes time to like what Acton's referencing here, guys saw playing time, I'm assuming that would not include Ty Strickland and Arashma Parks, who played sparingly this year. Of course, Ty had the shoulder injury at the beginning of the season. Arashma's had ongoing shoulder issues. I think sometimes people assume like, well, they're not playing much, they're going to transfer. Sometimes these guys just might be happy in the roles that they're in, and Ty could end up sticking around for another year and graduating, and maybe he goes somewhere else, or maybe he sticks around. Arashma could be the same thing. We'll see. But again, obviously, I think the people that you keep an eye on, again, JP has already declared or entered the transfer portal, and then you want to look at Dre and Brendan Barry. And a guy like Brendan Barry, again, I think if he wants to come back, I think Temple would obviously take him. He can shoot the heck out of the ball. Again, we talked to Jimmy about that whole issue of that fans debate, and I think I've been guilty of tweeting it a couple of times, like, could they get him a couple extra looks here? But it's not always that simple. So those will be the 3 guys to keep an eye on. So that'll do it for this week. A big thank you to
John. Before we do wrap up the show today, I did want to bring up a conversation we had a couple weeks ago. There was a reader mailbag question of long away predictions of a Final Four, and I had been the one that really did not have a good answer for a Final Four, and we're not going to see each other again until after the first round. So I did want to get a re-up of this question of what you guys have any insanely bold predictions for the first round of the NCAA tournament or for your Final Four. And if you guys want, I'm happy to start, because I do have my bracket up here now that I finished today. It will probably be changed 100 times by the time the first round starts. But as of right now, my Final Four is Gonzaga, Ohio State, Illinois, and Florida State.
Oh, I like
and
that.
my not so bold prediction, or my upsets that I'm most excited / confident in, are Winthrop over Villanova.
Everyone is, right?
Yeah, that's kind of a common one now. I like Syracuse over San Diego State, although Graham told me that was too obvious of an upset to pick. And I had one more that I liked that I'm trying to find. Oh, Georgetown over Colorado, I go back and forth with a lot, but I think I like Georgetown at 12-5.
Yeah, I'm picking a lot of upsets, I noticed, which, probably might come back to bite me. But I like Santa Barbara, where Josh Pierre-Louis is now, to beat Creighton. I think they're a good team. And I think Creighton is kind of reeling after getting demolished by Georgetown in the Big East tournament. And then picked Ohio over Virginia. I think Virginia is in quarantine until tomorrow, and then they're expected to play a game on Friday. And Ohio has a really good point guard named Jason Preston, who's like a LaMelo Ball type.
Mm.
So maybe we'll get to see a 12 seed play a 13 seed in the second round. I love that. But going into my Final Four, it's nothing like too crazy. Gonzaga, I have 3 1 seeds and a 2 seed. Gonzaga, Illinois, Baylor, and Alabama, and I have Gonzaga beating Illinois. And
Don't worry, it's not going to happen. There's not going to be 3-1 seeds. Every year I make a bracket and I'm like, I picked all top 2 seeds. This has literally never happened. It's not. I
know my brackets. Just what do you want me to come out and say that I'm going to have a perfect bracket, Sam?
Yeah, that's the goal. Is to go in every year thinking this is the year where it's a perfect bracket and it's mine. You have to go in every tournament thinking that way.
I've filled out one that's like just straight up picks, and then I need to, if I still have time, I'm supposed to hop into another one where you pick against the spread, which I am just terrible at. So we'll see how I do with that one. My Final Four in one bracket I filled out is Gonzaga, Michigan, Illinois, and Arkansas. So I have Illinois beating Arkansas in the Final Four, Michigan beating Gonzaga, and then Michigan beating Arkansas. I'm kind of scanning through this here. Any upsets? I don't know how much of an upset VCU over Oregon would be. Sam, I agree with you. I have UC Santa Barbara over Creighton. Maybe Josh Pierre-Louis gets some minutes in that game. I know he hasn't been playing a ton. I have Winthrop over Villanova. Have Utah State. I'm trying to scan through.
Ohio over Virginia is my favorite upset. I really hope Virginia loses. They're the most upset-prone team ever. And they're also recovering from COVID right now, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, I think them being in quarantine up and playing a team that's red hot like Ohio is just like not a good.
And Jason Preston is just like the ultimate Cinderella story.
Yeah, definitely.
Virginia's they have literally seen the highest of highs and lowest of lows. I mean, Tony Bennett. I think Tony Bennett's a hell of a coach, hell of a defensive coach. They're not anything fancy offensively, but I mean, they're the first team in history to lose to a 16 seed, and then they bounce back and win a national championship. I think they're capable of anything either way. I have Liberty over Oklahoma State.
Oh, wow.
I have every year. I think we've talked about this. So I have Houston beating Cleveland State, which is not an upset, and then you've got Houston facing Rutgers. I picked Rutgers because I think that Houston lets me down every year. I think we might have talked about that last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. Again, Kelvin Sampson's done a hell of a job there. I think I've tried to remind fans a couple of times. It took him 4 years to get Houston to the tournament. We know how good they are right now, but they always seem to be a bit of a letdown. How far do you guys have Houston going?
I have seen a handful of pundits, we'll say, pick Rutgers to beat Houston like you did. I have Houston losing to Illinois in the Elite Eight.
Yeah,
I think if Houston's going to make a run, it's going to be this year. And Quentin Grimes is playing out of his mind. I think the pieces around him, like Justin Gorham, as we had talked about earlier in the pod, I think Houston really does so many things well. And I think if they're playing their best basketball, I don't see a way. Although I do really like Rutgers. I think Rutgers is probably the grittiest team in the entire country, and I do enjoy watching Rutgers basketball. I think Houston's just a more skilled team, and they do a lot of things really well.
I picked a couple 10 seeds over. I mean, I picked Rutgers over Clemson. I don't know how big of an upset that is, and I picked Virginia Tech over Florida. So a couple 10 seeds over 7.
Do you have Houston beating West Virginia in the Sweet 16?
I do, yeah. And then going to the Elite Eight and playing Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we'll see. See how confident we are in our brackets now. We'll talk next week about where they actually are. But
about how gross they are after.
With tears in our eyes and money not in our pockets.
Yeah. Well, anyway, again, a big thank you to Jimmy Fenerty for joining us. Thank you to all of you for continuing to support the podcast and listen to it. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the NCAA tournament. We'll talk to you soon.